the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. From 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. Thank you for joining us. Today is May 11th, 2018. It is 8 o'clock in the morning here on the West Coast. It's a bit overcast, but I do see a bit of blue skies, so I think we're in for a hopefully non-aerial sprayed day. How about that? I'm going to hope for that one. So thanks for joining us. I also want to thank KEPW for carrying our podcasts. I don't believe they actually carry our Friday podcast, but thanks anyways in case someone listens to this on YouTube. And I want to thank our YouTube listeners for following UCY TV and listening to our podcast. You know, today is Friday. It is Roundup Friday with Jerome and Lonnie. Hi, Jerome. It's Jerome Hebert, my co-host. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You know what I wanted to do before we get into the whole roundup of the conversation is I want to read a poem, as I'm wont to do, by Lao Tzu. It's translated by Witter Bynner. It's called The Way of Life. The book is called The Way of Life According to Lao Tzu, and this is number 56 poem. And it's not very long, but I think it's pretty telling right now, and I think it will help us get our minds in the right place. Those who know do not tell. Those who tell do not know. Not to set the tongue loose, but to curb it. Not to have edges that catch, but to remain untangled, unblinded, unconfused, is to find balance. He who holds balance beyond sway of love or hate, beyond reach of profit or loss, beyond care of praise or blame, has attained the highest post in the world.
That is certainly deep.
I know. That was written 600, I guess more than 2,000 years ago, too.
Yeah, it's like about 3,000 now.
Well, 600 BC, right? So we're in 1920 practically, so just about 2,000 years ago, or maybe 2,600 years ago, I guess it is, right? Because we're in the 2000s. I keep thinking we're in the 1900s. Oops. That's what happens when you're born in 1955. So, Jerome, this has been a very interesting week of news and of our reporting. We had, I think, some really pretty interesting shows. I really love my show with Carl Grossman, and Chuck Johnson, and, your show explaining what's going on. I mean, oh my gosh, it's, after listening to your show yesterday, I actually took a walk. Right about quarter before the show ended, I put my headsets on and went for a walk, and I thought, What is it going to take? What's it going to take for people to care? Like, really, Thomas Ackerman made a comment that he said people don't care because they don't think it's happening. They don't believe it's really, really happening because they feel just normal.
Exactly.
But they don't. Their kids are getting
Not
sick.
real.
They're sick. They're having to go to the doctor. They're not well. Things are happening. We have a high incidence of schizophrenia, high incidence of diabetes. You know, people are out of whack. And it's not just because they eat bad. And yes, it is because they eat bad, but we have been flooded with toxins. It's amazing that humans and life on this planet exists.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it is now just we're at the incipient parts of it becoming exposed and getting out. A lot of it. Everywhere you look, there's dry casks of fuel that have been sitting there since the 60s and 70s, rotting away that can never be moved or picked up, that have enough plutonium in them to, you don't want that exposed. That'll burn. Plutonium burns and it hits air, so you got to keep them in the airtight. If there's air gets in there, they burn. So, that's one of the tricks of dry cask is people don't understand. They aren't just the plutonium in the metal will actually burn. It will be hot if exposed to air. That's why you can't have any ruptures in any of the fuel rods. The zirconium should keep it airtight in there, but sometimes, stuff happens over 150, 200 years, Lonnie, 300 years, and that's the short-sightedness. That's why it's not real, because they've hidden it from us.
Well, the weird part is they're not going to be able to hide it. We're having volcanoes. I mean, Hawaii is busting apart, essentially, it feels like. There's something going on super big. I mean, it's blasting projectiles into the air. There was also a big...
imagine if it sets up Yellowstone.
There was a huge volcano, I forgot. There was a volcano eruption this morning that I read about. I don't know if it was this morning, but recently. 50,000 feet in the air. That was huge. So imagine if we have all these... Yeah, some thing went up in Indonesia, volcano, spectacular images of Indonesian eruption.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It went up 3 miles. The radius was 3 miles. So imagine what's going to happen if something like that happens, say, near Japan, Mount Fuji.
Right.
Like what would happen if that type of activity spreads up the Pacific chain? Or in the Micronesian, where the Marshall Islands, where we have those domes that are collapsing. What's it doing to those domes that are collapsing? Yeah.
And furthermore, what's going to happen to Europe, which has a higher density of nuclear power than any other place on the planet? Europe is literally loaded. Europe, all of Europe, loaded with fuel, spent fuel, processing facilities, plants, breeding facilities, et cetera, literally loaded. The oligarchs have put a lot of their money over in Europe as far as the nuclear is concerned, because they know Americans won't put up with much, but the Europeans are much more compliant. And they'll put up with it. They'll say, oh, it's safe. The government says it's safe. Don't question the government. Move on.
Also, they feel they have, because they utilize the safer standards than the United States. Part of what stopped the United States has been the fact that we store our stuff in half-inch thick containers. And it's caused more of a problem, right? So I think that's why people in Europe, it's not that they're more, it's just that they believe that they are using better standards and they could use the technology safer and sounder, like in Sweden. This week you mentioned that they built an underground thing. I don't actually believe it's in Sweden. I think it's in one of those countries, underground nuclear storage. But the bottom line is they feel like they have safely maintained their nuclear power plants. That's why they feel more confident. That's what I think from the people that I've talked to.
Plus, they got the background from Chernobyl to cover up their so they can get as dirty as they want, because Chernobyl already loaded the place with cesium and strontium years ago. So you want to understand cesium, look on YouTube, Lonnie, for a video of cesium in air. Just look that up, and you will see cesium is amazing how it acts in air. It's amazing. It turns into its smallest component instantly. Poof, gone. Big cloud of white powder, dust, stuff, whatever it is. And it goes into the air in microscopic specks, and it disperses. It goes into the water. It goes literally everywhere. It's finer than talcum powder could ever be. So is strontium. They explode apart. They literally don't want to exist, and that they're blowing themselves apart. So they immediately go to their tiniest component part. That is one of the most hideous things about it, and then they spread evenly everywhere. Make sure you wash your hands with soap and water. That's what they were telling them. Wash your hands with soap and water.
This deep buried nuclear facility is called Onkalo Spent Nuclear Fuel Repository. And if you look at a map of it, its plan is to build a deep web, like down to 180 meters. And then you just go, they buried it all the way down, and then just to leave it there. But it's had problems. I mean, it has closed and has had problems. The issue is really just beyond that, because it's not just nuclear. Well, not only nuclear, but we have all the other chemicals.
We got the chemical, and now we got the sky spraying, and trying to cover up for something else.
I mean,
we got pharmaceutical, medical industry, all in compliance with the nuclear industry, which is all owned and operated independent of the United States government. The government does not own any of the nuclear. Any of it. Even the stuff that's for bombs, they don't own it. Other outside contractors run it, operate it, manage it. They have proprietary agreements. They won't let an FBI guy look around. They put a blindfold on the FBI guys and took them through certain parts of Rocky Flats when they were investigating it. They're like, well, you're going to have to put on at least a blindfold because of my secrecy issues. My national security, whatever the hell it was. But yeah, so the United States government, and therefore the people of the United States, do not own and operate our nuclear program or our weapons program. They want you to think they do. They really, the whole regulations and all that, they want you to think they do, but they really don't. They do what they want. I think that's what your guy this week was saying, is the bottom line is they do whatever they want to do. And they know that we don't understand enough to rise up against it. Well, we'll never be able to get a consensus of individuals strong enough to rise up against it at one time, because it's a hard thing to get your head around.
Well, Jerome, I think you were technically incorrect. The United States owns the plutonium. Now, they have subcontracted with these, for the patents and all the stuff where they own all that. They might allow these corporations to deal with it, but the responsibility for plutonium, nuclear, just all the nuclear stuff rests with the United States. Each government owns the nuclear products, but they subcontracted, but it's part of how they've done our military. They're subcontracting out that too. And this is kind of the bottom line why nuclear has really proliferated. Along with the nuclear industry came with the buildup of the industrial military complex. And that is what Eisenhower warned us about. Like that, they are going to go hand in hand. And we're talking, Jules has covered this on her show, the Star Wars weapons. Carl Grossman talked about that. How, they have the Star Wars things that came out when Reagan was president, and it freaked out everybody so badly that they all agreed we're not going to start the Star Wars program. But the United States really never ended its Star Wars program. It kept going. It is beyond comprehension. that we find ourselves looking backwards at how a silent military coup has taken over the United States of America. I know you've been saying we need to contact our representative. Actually, there's many people speaking that out. There's lots of activists out there saying we have got to push our Congress people to do their jobs despite the money,
Right. And I've come to the conclusion that with our current group of quote-unquote leaders, I don't think that there is the will. I don't think they'll listen to people. We need to replace them. We need to get different leadership. We need to get people in there, people along akin to Tulsi Gabbard, for instance. I listened to her. Tucker Carlson got an opportunity to go at Tulsi Gabbard, and he couldn't say a word. He could only go, wow, okay, that was very interesting. Thank you for coming on today. There wasn't one sharp or short remark. I was like, whoa.
He was like, oh,
and she was
man.
Right. Bottom line, like, no war. First off, no war. If you have no war, you need no nuclear. Boom. That takes care of that. It's not a national security issue anymore. Now it's a social issue. Now people can rise up against it and win. I don't know if that makes any sense, but we need to move away from where we are. We need to move away from the need for nuclear. Oh, we got to have nuclear weapons. We got to. If we don't, they're going to use them on us. Would they really? Come on. Who's going to use them on anybody? Because using them on anybody, really, you know that you're using them on yourself. You can't isolate those things. Russia knows that if it bombs the crap out of the United States enough to take us out, well then, guess what? They're going to be poisoned as well when that cloud rolls right over them. Okay, and they're going to kill off half, 3/4 of their own people. They know that, and they're going to have the government will collapse because of the cost. Do you see what I mean? Anybody who uses nuclear weapons it's suicidal. So it's almost like, why would anybody logically have them? Because it's a suicidal weapon. If you use this weapon,
it is, because it's not just the weapon, but it would cause such devastation on the crops worldwide. It would really devastate our worldwide food supply, period.
Yes. Contaminate everyone.
It is
if you used enough to take the country out. Okay, that's the caveat there. It's not like a limited one here or one there. I'm talking 100 thermonuclear warheads, enough to make the United States drop to its knees and let Russia be whatever it is. We don't even care. We aren't really a country anymore. The only way you could take us down would be to do that, and then still you would get nuked. But if we didn't have nukes, for instance, and it makes no sense for somebody to start that, because you've got to know, if you own them, the effects of them and the radiation, and we know about fallout now. They've studied that, so it's illogical. That's what Spock would say. A weapon of this sort is illogical given the status of the civilization that possesses it. So why do they continue to do this? It's illogical. I honestly, I look around on me every day and I see the beauty around me, the beauty of nature, and I just wonder about it. I just wonder over it. I love it. And I can't imagine a thing that could just destroy that. I just can't imagine it. But so maybe it's not even real for me. I still fight against it despite that. But, I guess there you go. You boil back down to, well, you can't do anything. Do what you can do right now and love. All you can do is love. Be kind to people. Cherish each other. Cherish nature. Pick up that litter when you see it. Do stupid little things like that make a difference. Only to you, perhaps. But that should be enough.
On the IPPNW webpage, one of the stories they have here is called "Don't Bank on the Bomb." It's called, actually, I guess it's a link to its own website. www.don'tbankonthebomb.com, 2018 summary findings. So this is a very interesting thing how this report says. It says there are 329 significant investors. From January 14 through October 17, our research found 329 banks, insurance companies, pension funds, and asset managers from 24 countries that invest significantly. In the top 20. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Jerome?
No, I was saying hello as in hello, wake up, world.
Yep.
And see, that's what I was
24
saying.
countries,
That's what I was
the
saying.
top 20 nuclear weapons. Now, there are 20 nuclear weapon producing companies. Don't bank on the bomb 18 profiles of 20 companies that involved in the production of key components of nuclear arsenals in France, India, the United Kingdom, and the United States. So four major countries have 20 major companies that are directly involved. In the United States, one producer, the one up in Hanford, by the way, CH2M Hill, was acquired in December 2017 by Jacobs Engineering. However, we have retained their profile and investment information as the acquisition took place after the close of our financial research. So check this out. So Jacobs Engineering is still using CH2M Hill every time they report on Hanford. Have you heard that? I haven't heard of Jacobs Engineering. Have you?
I've never heard of Jacobs Engineering.
Just recently, December 17, you know why they purchased them? Because of that big collapse last year, that big, huge collapse that they mangled and mishandled. They're trying to slough off the financial and responsibility and the ethical responsibility of the way they handled all of that and the things they've been doing. So this is what they do. They toss the nuclear football around with each other, this nuclear contamination football. Wow, this is beyond comprehension.
Tag, you're it. Oops, a little got out.
525 billion. Listen to this, Jerome. $525 billion invested. In total, more than $525 billion US dollars was made available to the nuclear weapon producing companies by the investors listed. These investors assisted with the share and bond issuances, owned or managed shares and bonds or outstanding loans, or made credit facilities available to nuclear weapon producing companies between January 14 and October 17. Wow.
Right. So what we're doing is we're decommissioning one warhead and we're installing a better warhead where that one was.
These are the top three in the United States. The top three, BlackRock, Capital Group, and Vanguard, have a combined investment of more than $110 billion. In Europe, the most heavily invested are BNP Paribas in France, Crédit Agricole in France, Barclays in the United Kingdom with a combined investment of, $24 billion. Well, look, the United States has 110 billion. Europe has 24, and the Asia Pacific has 17 billion. The Life Insurance Corporation of India is heavily invested in. These are the three biggest investors in the region, Asia Pacific region. Mitsubishi UFJ Financial, which is not shocking. Mizuho Financial, also not shocking. But this one, Life Insurance Corporation of India. The Life Insurance Corporation of India. Think about that. That's almost a sick joke, don't you think, Jerome?
Yeah, all of those companies are controlled by a small group of people at the top, and those people own the whole nuclear thing, and that's what I keep saying. Nobody really wants to pay attention to that, but yeah, there is an oligarchy. There is a nuclear priesthood, and there's a few people who control all of this, okay? They allow governments to think that they're in control, but their contractors are the ones actually arming and detonating these weapons in the event that they're needed.
Well, listen to this.
Not the military.
This is funny.
The military pushes a button, but the contractors are the ones that make sure the weapon will work. You know, they have control ultimately. And I keep trying to point this out, Lonnie. And that's why we need to get the contractors out of our nuclear program.
That's called the Price-Anderson Act. This is all about the Price-Anderson Act. You're talking about, in the United States, you're talking about the Price-Anderson Act. That's why I enrolled in school, so we could turn back the Price-Anderson Act. But after going to school for the last 6 years, you know what I've realized? We're not getting the Price-Anderson Act revoked. They are heavily invested. They will kill anyone in their way. It is not going to happen. They are intent. They have all the power. This is why there's only 6 law firms, maybe 7 in the entire United States that fight the nuclear industry. So listen to this. Don't bank on the bomb, people. They have 22 positive examples, the Hall of Fame. They also profile financial institutions that have adopted, implemented, and published a policy that comprehensively prevents any financial involvement in nuclear weapon producing companies. 22 financial institutions, only 22 have a public policy that is comprehensive in scope and application. 4 more than listed in 2016. The financial institutions are based in Australia, Denmark, Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and the United States.
So wouldn't that nuclear power? So let me just read the overview of the Price-Anderson Act that you mentioned. It's United States federal law, first passed in 1957 and since renewed several times, which governs liability-related issues for all non-military nuclear facilities constructed in the United States before 2026. The main purpose of the Act is to partially compensate the nuclear industry against liability claims arising from nuclear incidents, while still ensuring compensation coverage for the general public. The Act establishes a no-fault insurance type system in which the first approximately $12.6 billion as of 2011 is industry funded as described in the Act. Any claims above the $12.6 billion level would be covered by a congressional mandate to retroactively increase nuclear unit utility liability, or would be covered by the federal government at the time of the Act's passing. It was considered necessary, an incentive for private production of nuclear power. And this was because electric utilities viewed the available liability coverage, only $60 million, as inadequate. So the Act survived a constitutional challenge in the Supreme Court, Duke Power versus Carolina Environmental Study Group. And it was last renewed in 2005 for a 20-year period.
That's right. And you know what? They think it's a benefit.
It's very profitable, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Listen to what this little pamphlet says. The American Nuclear Society puts out a little pamphlet on the Price-Anderson Act, Jerome, and this is what it says. The Act has removed the deterrent in the private sector participation in nuclear activities presented by the threat of potential liability claims following a large accident. So this is, honestly, the way they have it set up is they need to, if the government did this, this would occupy the whole freaking military. They couldn't do it. You know what I mean? This is a money-losing. Why do you think the nuclear industry can't get insurance? Because it's a money-losing proposition. Because the long-term negative benefits outweigh the short-term positive benefits of carbon-free, energy for 20 years, as opposed to 100,000 years of waste and contamination. I mean, the financial burden that the nuclear industry has caused the medical industry. What did you say, Jerome?
I think they just look at it. I think that they just look at it as a numbers game, Lonnie.
Oh, you were completely right.
1 in 500 million chance that this nuclear power plant will melt down, at which point it becomes a bad investment. Are we going to risk that or not? The people with the money are smart, and they're not risking their money. The United States government is willing to cover and for them. But basically,
it's actually worse than that, because the way that, at least in the United States, I don't know the laws in Europe, but I know in the United States, these companies are actually incentivized to rush the job and do it wrong. They get paid their bonus not if it functions properly, but if they hit a deadline. So if they hit the deadline and it messes up, they get paid. If they miss the deadline to make it correct, they don't get paid the extra billions of millions of dollars. What did Mr. Truth tell us? They told him to rush the job in building this because they had a deadline. That is common practice.
Right.
So this is the question.
And there you go. That's
people enough to care to stop. How do we get people to want to stop this, though? When they've got busy lives.
Well, you gotta make it real. You got to make it real for them, and there's no way to do that at this moment.
Well, these volcanoes are certainly going to.
Well, the volcano's just going to make the air a little cloudy here and there, and actually, the sulfur in the air will actually increase the temperature.
I'm talking about the disruption, the earthquakes. The ripple effect of earthquakes is bound to hit at some point. I mean, you want to know where an earthquake fault is? Look for a nuclear power plant. At some point.
That's true, honey.
Yes. So at some point and probably not the too distant future, since a lot of earthquakes are really precipitated. 2 days before the tsunami in Fukushima, there was a big, gigantic earthquake, just like there was very recently. So, I mean, we know these things, that they're not all disconnected. Just because you're far away from a volcano doesn't mean it couldn't cause a ripple effect where you're at. And the downside is we are living literally on nuclear time bombs all around the planet.
Exactly. You're right. And a lot of them are really due to go off any second.
Well, good morning, folks. I hope you're enjoying your coffee.
Well, actually, Lonnie, I'm standing outside. I'm in Eugene, Oregon, as well. And it's a sunny but cool and beautiful morning. And everything looks happy in nature at this moment.
That's what they count on.
I feel happy that everything is
happy, I mean, this is the sad part. The effects of what's going on is nothing that we can actively. And I think this is why people shrug their shoulders, look at us and say, wow, how can you face it? How can you think about it? Well, because for them, they have to live their lives. People need to get on and about their lives. And then there's other people that are like, are you kidding? Nuclear is nothing compared to what the chemical is doing, what the pharmaceuticals are doing, what the space industry is doing. I mean, they're using electronics on us to vibrate our brains and do all kinds of weird stuff that we don't even know is happening. Right? So, yeah. I mean, you get on someone's target list. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say they do it to everybody, but they find people. They have targets. They have people that, for one reason or another, are, an unwilling victim in the scheme of the experiment. And I think it's really just experimentation.
I found that it was disenfranchised and disempowered citizens, such as prisoners and end-run cancer patients who were not white, basically. And people like that, retarded school kids, that's who they experimented on. People who couldn't really understand, talk, or defend against what they were doing. If they did figure it out, nobody would listen to them. Yeah, sure. Yeah, they injected you with something. Yeah, you're just feeling sick, that's all. Go lay down. So, they wouldn't, well, I'm going to get a lawyer. Yeah, sure, you're going to get a lawyer. Go lay down. No lawyer's going to represent that guy. That's the sort of people
And actually, that's exactly what happened in 99.9% of the cases. Nobody listened, and they couldn't get representation. I mean, it wasn't until 20 years, 25 years later that a lot of people began to believe them. You know, this is how we know about it, because of these reports where in the 70s and the 80s, and, you know, when people were really going to stop the nuclear industry, a lot of the activists in the early 90s and the 2000s, I think it died down by the 2000s, but in the early 90s, there was some very hardcore activists who went out and found out and dug up a lot of stuff. And that's when John Goffman wrote that book, Population Control Through Nuclear Contamination. He wrote it I think the title was tongue-in-cheek, but he wrote it as a warning. Like, if we do not manage this stuff, that is what you're going to do, because it is going to deter our ability to reproduce, period. We will not be able to. And maybe that's the point of it, population control through nuclear contamination. The problem is they're killing everything along with it.
Well, I mean, think about it. If you had a master plan and your great-great-great-grandfather in Nazi Germany was part of it, and there was some British guys and French guys and even a Russian guy that was part of it, and everybody was super, super rich, and you knew about this nuclear thing, how could you use it to your advantage and then get control of it? Yeah, and once you get financial control of it, then it's yours. I don't care who has the button to set the damn thing off. It's not going to go off unless you want it to. Does that make sense, Lonnie? And so if you really own the thing, and we don't, the people don't own it, the government doesn't own it, we are tricked into thinking that they do and that they control it. And yeah, they run around with some Geiger counters and go, oop, that's bad. Oop, that's bad. Oh, mostly good, though. It's all really good. It's good. Yeah, that's what I said, good. I say that it's good because they're not in control. You know, we, the people, are not in control of the government, which is supposedly in control of our nuclear capability. Let's call it that. The whole picture, including medical. Most of the NRC events on their website pertain to medical incidents, Lonnie. There's a huge amount of radioisotopes loose in the environment.
I would say that's not correct. All over the country. That is not correct. Most of their alerts
Look at their
are not.
Notifications.
I do. I used to read them daily on this radio show. I used to read them all the time. No, I would say that at least every day there's a notification. Out of 5 events, there's one event a day, or you know what I mean? Or I would say there's a high incidence of reporting. 2 or 3 and nothing to do with power plants in like 2 days, 3 days. Well, that has nothing to do with, well, you know what? I would venture to say that is a part of the Rick Perry Department of Energy decision. If you look at how they are reporting, I mean, this is the interesting thing. Go back and look at the historically of how many they would report a year ago and how many they report now. I have been noticing this more and more. There's less and less events being reported, and that's because in Trump Nation, we're on a need-to-know basis because the military is in control. He basically he released the military. They are at a free hand. This is how, to be honest, the government, the government was kind of humming. It was this big machine, but it was going. It had its own thing. There was a political thing. They've literally kicked a cog in the wheel, and things are broken. Things are not working. That's why those 4 soldiers in Niger got killed, because communications broke down. Things did not work as they should have, or as they normally had. That's because of when you do slight changes, like when the president says, I'm not going to read my daily briefings anymore, I'm not going to think about it. There's not that extra external voice. When the president says to the military, you guys don't need me, you're the experts, just the only thing I need to consult on is if you're going to use the nuclear bomb. That's it. But everything else, you guys make the decisions. And that is essentially, that's abdicating his role as president. Again, an act of treason, in my view. I believe that he is really seriously damaged. I mean, even if we kick him out, in order to recoup, just like in Chile, in order for them to regain their democracy and make their country strong again, it took them a good long while. And this one is going to take us a good long while if we have the time. If he doesn't do serious fatal damage.
Yeah, this is all up for conjecture, and I never comment on it. I disagree with the whole picture, the whole thing. I understand it at a bigger level that it's troubling to me, and most other people don't get. And I think that's
so
one of the reasons why I continue to educate.
On that. That's so condescending, as if you're the only one who can get it. So explain to us, Master. Explain to us the big picture that
it's not Donald Trump. It's not the Republicans. It's not the Democrats.
No shit, Sherlock. We're not saying
it's not our democracy.
Well, you know what, Jerome?
Our democracy is owned part and parcel by the corporation who, when they cheated on it, told us, well, guess what? We're a private corporation. We'll cheat if we want. It's our election. Okay? It's not your election. It's our election. Okay? That's what we were told. And I think people forget that. They forget that there is a bigger thing going on, and we think we're participating, and we think we're connected, and we have become disconnected. And I think that somebody needs to say it. Somebody needs to make people think twice
Jerome, you're
about
not the only one saying it, and it's not like we're not aware of that. That's not the point. We're completely aware.
No, I'm not trying to be condescending.
However, this guy Trump is literally the reason that he's doing the fatal tying. What do you think Mission Accomplished was about? When George Bush stood on the deck of the ship and said, "Mission accomplished," you know what he meant? We have a complete oligarchy tied up right now, tied in a neat little bow. We are going to keep this and make this the best banana republic on the planet. So, look, when I say that this guy is a traitor, I'm not saying he's the only one. But he is the reason that our country is not able to function as well as it could, because in a year and a half he has decimated a lot. Like these sanctions, there's no one to run the sanctions office. The sanctions office is closed, essentially. The IRS is underfunded and understaffed by more than a third. The government...
Yeah.
Betsy DeVos wants to cut off funding for public schools. I mean, they don't believe in actually, the whole thing started with George Bush. I mean, honestly, George Bush Jr. came in and tied the bow for his dad. Boop. And frankly, since we're on this topic, I think for me, it makes me very nervous that the meeting with Kim Jong-un and Trump is on George Bush Sr.'s birthday. That these things are not an accident. Yeah. These rats that run the show, they love numbers. They've done that Pinochet was installed on 9/11, the same day as 9/11 was taken over in our country. And I have called Trump Pinochet 2.0 from the get, because I think he is part of their plan. He is Trump the chump, and he has perfectly played his role. But this thing about the 12th, and as we're talking about nuclear weapons and nuclear bombs, I don't know about you, but I am highly suspicious that these two guys are going to come out of that meeting and we are going to be free from a nuclear bomb dropping somewhere. I think they're going into that meeting to plan just exactly the story face to face, so they don't have any online communication. They're going to talk about it personally. I don't trust them. Kim Jong-un and Traitor Trump.
Who's gonna?
This Trump summit that's happening on Poppy Bush's birthday is, to me, extremely, I just don't trust them. And I think that our instincts that the axe is about to fall I think it's correct. I don't know how, or maybe they won't even get there. Maybe they'll find a reason to start fighting before June 12th, and then it'll happen between now and June 12th.
So there's a summit on June 12th between who? North Korea and the United States?
Yes, it's a historic.
Or North Korea and South Korea?
No, Trump is going to meet Kim Jong-un in Singapore on June 12th.
Fascinating. Well, gee whiz, what happened to the insane guy that's sent to America? How did that change all of a sudden?
Well, the point is, he's still an insane guy. He still killed his brother. He's still making his people suffer. This is not the end. In fact, these hostages that were recently released were taken during the Trump administration's term. This isn't like, we just didn't hear about it. They were kept. One guy was kept late in the Obama term, and then the other two were taken, one right after the inauguration and one just recently. So this is political play at its best, but the problem is they're playing with our lives because now we're talking about nuclear weapons. Now we're talking about people who have...
Anybody uses them, like we talked about a while ago, even once.
And we have John Bolton in the White House. John Bolton is definitely, the advisor to the president, is definitely a man who believes in strike first. That's his motto almost practically, strike first. He does not mess around. John Bolton believes in the strict arm of the law. Boom. And if Kim Jong-un, they get into this meeting and Kim Jong-un says something or does something, I guarantee you this is the problem with having a weak-minded president, a president who doesn't understand politics or actually much. He's not very well educated. He might be smart, but he's not educated. And he does not understand how all of this stuff works. And him just taking advice from John Bolton, who says, well, we've got to go bomb North Korea. And he's like, okay, that's what we're going to do. Bomb North Korea. I'll be the president to protect the world. That's what I mean. Yeah, and look, I get that. See, this is why I think he's the perfect chump.
Honestly, meaning, I've had issues with every president since Carter. Okay? Every single one of them I've disliked since Carter. Some of them I thought that would be okay, but they weren't.
Look, the whole point...
I had great hope for Obama. I was disappointed.
Well, weren't we all? But this gets back to your point of you saying, oh, well, I understand it better than everyone. No, you don't. We all understand it. We are not in control of the government. It's actually, Eisenhower told us that. And actually, it's been kind of a lot longer than that. I mean, if we look at the election fraud and the voter rate, I mean, from the beginning of our Constitution, women and black people and people of color were not considered voters. So this is the point of the American democracy, Jerome. We want our freedom and our liberty. We want representation. We must fight. We must assert our own rights. Because if we don't assert them, which is what's happened, they're going to take them away from us, period. They have taken them away from us. I mean, with the Unpatriot Act, people just clicked their heels and said, Sig Heil, please go tap my phone. I mean, the American government pays every single cell phone company $4,000 a year to get our metadata. That's an outrage. That's actually in the budget. That's the national security budget. They pay every single cell phone provider $4,000 a year to get our metadata.
Yeah. And probably Obama was behind that and that happened.
I think if they're going to do that, I called Ron Wyden's office and said, look, if we're going to do this, we should get free cell phone. Because why should I, as a taxpayer, pay them $4,000 a year, and then as a private individual, I have to pay them my $1,200 or $1,800 a year, whatever it is. You know what I mean? That's
true. You have an understanding of what it means, taxpayer.
It's kind of like this whole thing about the nuclear bomb thing. Like, we're just passively going, oh, well, God, I hope they don't drop the bomb on us. No, we need to, I definitely plan on bringing some protest signs with me when I table out at the KEPW table this Saturday morning. I'm going to be out on the Saturday market with, I think, John Abbey, but I'm planning on bringing some protest signs about no nukes, man, for sure. We have got to get people calling their congresspeople and saying, whatever it is, we've got to get away from the whole nuclear conversation. We cannot do this. I mean, I think that, the reason that Kim Jong-un has come to the table, this is another reason. I mean, this is a multi-layered thing, but I think what speeded up the process is the fact that his nuclear facility collapsed, that big mountain collapsed. Remember, I reported on it about 3 months ago in September, actually. It was a 50-foot meter wide hole. When they were experimenting on their last bomb, they created a 50-foot meter wide hole, and I think they did severe damage to their own facilities. So, yeah, they're easy. That facility that they say they're
And do you think that their program's clean? They've probably got an epidemic of nuclear poisoning in North Korea right now.
Do you think they haven't been selling their nuclear stuff to anybody on the black market as much as they could? I mean,
no, I don't think they have the ability to process that much uranium into plutonium. Or uranium, or enrich that much uranium.
I would not trust them at all. I don't know about what they have and what they don't have. I don't trust them at all. If nothing else, to not be high-paid facilitators. I just don't trust. But see, then this gets into the multi-level dimension of what we're dealing with. This is kind of the hard part to comprehend. And I get what you meant, Jerome, that people don't comprehend it. Because it is multidimensional. It's not just one level or one layer of things. It's multidimensional. There is a whole oligarchic system in the backdrop of what we perceive to be our government. And then this nuclear industry, the government pretends like they own it, but actually it's the other way around. So it's kind of like a Oreo cookie. You know what I mean?
Right.
With us,
and then we go, so it's the military. The military owns it, but who runs the military? The Army a little bit, but mostly contractors. They're the ones that provide the weapons and build them and get it going and figure it out and get the technology and install it and program it and configure it and teach the soldiers, the few who are there. For every soldier, you need 50 backup people nowadays with this new Army we got. So the Army is now a technology machine with a few soldiers attached, and mostly going to automated drones and remote response technologies versus going in there with a guy with a gun. There are certain areas, but we're gonna do what we have been doing, which is we send a drone in with a couple of little missiles on it and go boom boom, take out the lead guy. And a few dozen civilians, but those are assets on a balance sheet at this point. Now you've taken ownership of those people. As soon as you have the ability to kill somebody and you're pointing something at them, you own that person. Their life is in your hands.
That's what it feels like to live near a nuclear power plant. You own those people. You own them. And in fact, it's true. And this is why the denial is so hard. This is the real shame of the nuclear industry. It had the potential to be something that could have been used honorably. Instead, they chose to ignore all the science and twist like pretzels to create laws that protected them from any liability to the detriment of our planet. And it is time for it to end.
Exactly.
It's time for it to end. It's a seriously bad thing. It's very much time for it to end.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So, I guess that's why we got the age of fission.
IPPNW.
Yes, and that is a great website because they have all these links. Like I found that link about the Don't Bank on Nukes report to be very uplifting because it really, to me, made it, and here's the Hall of Shame. They actually have a Hall of Shame. Remember I mentioned the, I'm gonna get the PDF. They have the Hall of Shame. We read the Hall of Fame, and so let's see where is it. See if I can find it.
Are you looking at their newsletter today?
Yes, I am. Positive examples, imperfect runner-ups, and then the Hall of. Where's the Hall of Shame? I can't find the Hall of Shame. I only see the runners-up. Don't bank on the bomb. This is actually a pretty interesting little website. This is pretty interesting.
That exposes the oligarchy right there is what it does.
Yes, it does,
That shows you. Well, on my show this week, Lonnie, I was like amazed that when I looked around for facilities and everything, every single place was like by whatever contractor. You would get the name of what they do and the contractor name right afterwards. There wasn't U.S. Department of this or that. It was the contractor. Somewhere in there, the contractor makes a contract with the United States, who buys the plutonium or buys the fuel rod or buys whatever from them, and then provides them protection against the waste that they have to produce in order to create these bombs and these fuel rods. Bombs and fuel rods are very nasty to the environment, and there's no way to make them cleanly or neatly. You can't do it yet. We just can't do this. We are not smart enough to do this yet, and we're going to be messy about it. And in our technical infancy, we're going to be messy, and that means a lot of us are going to die. And there's a certain percentage, and I think the oligarchy looks at that and goes, well, in the big picture, for my great-great-great-grandfather, who will continue this project on and that I inherited, it's been in my family for the last 4 generations, that's acceptable. Okay, that's the way these people are thinking. They're not thinking of humans as people and people as humans. They're thinking of humans as numbers on a balance sheet and people they'll never see or have to have any interaction with at all, and therefore are not responsible for on any level, morally or physically. So this is what we're dealing with, and if you remove money from the picture, these people would become powerless instantly, and the whole thing would change. But money is power, and that's where it all lies. And I think that in a way is the helplessness of it, Lonnie, is the fact that we are powerless because the oligarchs own it, not the government. The government doesn't. They could shut them down, but they wouldn't, and they never could. And I think
if they pass, I've said this many times, Jerome, if the Senate, think about it, if the Senate and the Congress passed a law that said immediately we're cutting the funding to the nuclear industry or to the military complex in half, we're just going to cut back on all of it. We really need the money for our people. How many senators would have accidents, or how many of them would have suicides, or how many of them would disappear? A lot. We would have that's where the coup would show its face. If our elected officials stood up to every one of these people who were bullying them, then we would see the coup. Then we would see who really runs the show. And that's how they take cover, because these guys that are in these respected positions pretend. And that is why Sheila Jackson Lee got chased out of the Congress, because she was like outing this. She's like, I'm not signing a pledge to Israel the third day I'm a congressperson. What are you talking about? She was expected to sign a pledge within the first 2 weeks of her arrival at Congress to always protect Israel no matter what. Everything that Israel did, to always 100% support them. But Jerome, guess what? We have 45 seconds left of the radio show. This has been a real delightful conversation. I have to say I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you, Lonnie.
And I want to thank our listeners for participating and listening, and be curious to get some feedback. You could send us, leave us a comment at nutsforart, NUTZFORART, at Gmail, or on our YouTube channel, and the Sane Environmentalist, that's Jerome Hebert. And, leave us a comment on one of our videos, because we're posting regularly. So thanks, Jerome, for today. It's been really delightful.
All right. Bye, Lonnie.
Bye, you guys, and put your courage feet on. We will talk with you guys on Monday. Thank you, KEPW, for sharing our show.